Hi, I'm Michael Fitzgerald. I'm a contributing editor for MIT Sloan Management Review, and I'm here today with Michelle McKenna-Doyle, who is Senior Vice President and Chief Information Officer for the National Football League. In fact, she's the first ever NFL CIO. We're going to talk today about analytics, which is something that, as you might guess, the NFL knows a lot about. It's a very statistics-oriented business, and so we're going to have a no-holds-barred, full-contact interview. Michelle, we're delighted to have you here with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Why was the NFL looking for a CIO?
I think the use of analytics and data-driven decisions has exploded in every industry, and as you mentioned in your intro, certainly we're no different in that respect. We'd always been someone who had made decisions based on analytics. That's how players are chosen, that's how game plans are set up, but they were looking for someone that said, all right, how would we run our business differently, and how would we build a better event, how would we connect to our fans better? How would we have a better in-stadium fan experience? And that's around a lot about what data they're doing, as well as making sure they're connected. And all of that, really led them to look for a way to bring a person that could link in all the specialties that already really existed around the league.
How's the process been of coming into the NFL and meshing with the team?
I was coming outside the sports industry, so I had to first prove I was a true sports fan and that I did understand the game at the right level. But then just listening and getting to know people and learning to collaborate. What I love about the NFL is it's a large brand, but it's a small group of people that run it, and once you make your way inside that group, you can get a lot of things done. So it was challenging, but I'm entering my third season now, and I think I've got the win behind me, hopefully.
And you're already talking about seasons, so this is good. So tell me about the role that you have. You're here at a central office, in effect, the NFL. But it's not like you're the headquarters for all these teams.
Right.
They have their own operations, their own CEOs, maybe their own CIOs. How's your role work within the NFL?
That's a great question, and I can definitely contrast it that I was coming from a Fortune 500 CIO role where I had control over all policy, all IT spend, all really technology decisions. And here the CIO is more of like a chief influence officer. I mean, you really have to do a lot of influencing others to work with you versus dictating it. I mean, we work very collaboratively with the clubs, but with the exception of the types of rules that you typically hear about, we don't mandate things to them. We do a lot by committee, so we set up different committees to advise the league office on what works best for clubs. And I've been very focused on listening and getting close to the clubs in the last couple of seasons. So I formed some committees around really key technologies like cloud and how do we move to it and what is the best use, and making sure we understand the needs of a big market team and maybe a smaller market team, some that are parts of a larger corporation, some are just a small shop from a technology perspective. So committee work, influencing, and really making sure we give good customer service to them is how I influence them.
And do all the teams have their own CIOs?
Some have CIO as a title, and some have something they call either head of IT, or in some cases they have a CTO. So again, a lot of it does depend on the size of the team and whether or not they're also responsible for other technology that may be a part of their owner's portfolio of business.
When you came in, where was analytics in your priorities?
It was my top priority. I mean, I knew that it's been my entire career, from my days at Disney to today, that's been my sweet spot, and the things that I moved into IT from finance and marketing, and so I knew that was really my differentiator, was making data available to the users to make decisions. So it was a real top priority.
And if I am looking at the NFL, where is the data? Is it all centralized, or the teams have their own data and it's widely decentralized?
What we've done in the past few seasons is to make sure our centralized database around game statistics, which has always been centralized because it is the central source of the truth for what happens in the game, and that gets distributed out to multiple places, including the clubs. And then they get to do with that data what they wish. They can add their sort of secret sauce. Some teams have PhDs that consult with them to build out very extensive modeling, and others, just hire a couple of college interns that do analysis. So my challenge is to not make the tool set too complicated. And I think if I were to give any advice to anyone that enter this, is if you focus on the front-facing tool more than you focus on the data architecture and infrastructure, you want it available to as many people as want to use it. Everyone's familiar with Excel, and so it sort of looks like Excel, and they're not as intimidated by building analysis in something that looks familiar like Excel. And so as a result, people don't even realize what they're doing. They're actually becoming data modelers and data analysts, and that's when the real power happens, when you get people to they're not intimidated by the tool set, they're invigorated by what kind of analysis they can do.
And so are there technologies that have come to bear over the last couple of years that have made this possible, or is the NFL just kind of missing an opportunity before you got here?
No, I think some of the technologies that had come to bear before I arrived were really for big company data analytics. I mean, there was a lot of tools on the marketplace that were extremely complicated to use. You had to really have data architects on staff to build these data warehouses and sort of subject area databases that people could analyze.
What's been the difference in kind of doing analytics in this environment as opposed to Fortune 500 companies?
Yeah, absolutely. Those tools, the easy to use tools, and the fact that the data already existed here in a very structured, well maintained organization, it was really a leg up, because most places I have gone to and had to do this, the runway to get to the point where you're actually doing analytics is long if your data is a mess and it's in multiple places and we already sort of had that cracked on the football side, and so we were able to jumpstart into analytics and using new graphics. So people want to see data in a way they can digest it, so that's not rows and columns, that's pie charts and bar charts and scatter diagrams, and we've created some really cool web interfaces so that player comparisons can be done. So it's been fun because I didn't have to spend all the time getting the data clean and right. I got to focus on analytics, where in other instances I've had to focus much more on the data side.
Did you have people on staff who could do this? One
of the great things about doing analytics in the National Football League is you probably could go out on the street in New York right now and find people who could do modeling on football statistics. So I have that working in my favor. I'm not analyzing how many widgets moved from point A to point B. We're talking about things that people track and create their own spreadsheets to make their own fantasy teams. So we had plenty of people in this building that understood the fundamental of the data and how to use it to make decisions. What we didn't have was a development team in-house, enough of them, to once the appetite began, to keep the pipeline full of all the different things we can do. I mean, there's just been request upon request. Once they realize they can analyze it and see it in this way, now they want, certainly we're moving into ticket pricing for Super Bowl, ticketing analytics for all the clubs, and comparing that to the third-party market. What does that mean as it relates to variable pricing versus fixed pricing? We've been able to show to the business community of football what really, that was always under the covers of some scout or a coach. Those were the ones that were really using it. Now that's being more visible. You can go onto NFL.com now and do all kinds of cool statistical analysis on your favorite player. And so it makes people think, well, if you can do that with that kind of data, can I give you all my ticket pricing? Can I give you, can we do it on, you name it, a different set of data? And so that's been my hardest point, is just keeping up with the demand.
Who are the people making these requests for you?
Some of it's clubs, but largely it's fans. So what we're hearing is more and more demand for our content, and people are playing fantasy and engaging in our products at rates that we never anticipated. There'll be free offerings, and then how do you monetize the next level? Well, data ends up being the way you can monetize it.
Moneyball obviously is kind of a now shorthand for using statistics to make a business run better. It's a baseball thing, and in baseball it's a team-driven thing, or it seems to be. So the NFL looks more centralized. Is that an accurate perception?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very similar. I mean, what you saw in the movie Moneyball is done every day at NFL teams, you know, from everything from scouting all the way through draft and then throughout the year. So.
And has Moneyball, the sense of using numbers this way, has that changed the way the NFL works?
No, I think what's interesting is I remember seeing that movie and thinking, I'm sure they all do this, right? What's the big deal? Certainly in the last 5 to 7 years, I would say the only thing that's changed has been the proliferation of tools to make it easier. Your best teams with your best scouts and I mean, they've been doing this kind of thing and they do it in their head. Watching these scouts and how they can just pick up on this, you know, key influencing data point that I never would have thought of is just amazing to me. And then once you capture that and can trend against it, it can be highly predictive. So we've been doing a little bit of looking back to see, okay, we thought this person, let's say he was, you know, X number of draft pick, and now how has he performed and were we off on those indications? And it's amazing the correlation you get between those indicators that you get at the combine in someone's ultimate success. So an example of new statistics are player tracking on the field. So we have next generation statistics, we call it, which is not hand captured or electronically captured statistics. It's actually being tracked as the player moves across the field. We tested that last year and we're still working on some ways to monetize that for our fans and sponsors and others. So a lot of the demand is just this insatiable appetite people have for the NFL content, which is a great position to be in because it funds the kinds of things that you want to do.
Tell me about this project. How long ago, for instance, did it start and what's the impetus behind it?
It started several years ago, actually. One of our key foundational things we count is player participation, so how many times you're on the field. And you know, right now, you check it from seeing who's running off and who's running on, and someone is recording that in a computer.
Because this is part of contracts.
Right, exactly. Right, it ties to the contract. So there was talks like years ago about how do we automate, like couldn't we just check in and check off, you know, like, you know, you see people tap something to go into the game well before there was tracking technology. So it's been talked about for a long time. And then about 3 years ago, they started realizing that you could put, you know, chips that, and the chipsets got smaller and smaller, and they became, you know, easily tucked under shoulder pads. And so we started testing that, and it's amazing. You can follow the path someone ran, and you can turn that all into video that is later used for teaching of players or game day planning, or, you know, ultimately for fan consumption. So we tested it extensively the last 2 years, and we are testing it again and then continuing to work. It's going to be, you know, quite an expensive endeavor. So we're looking for, you know, ways to monetize that content to make the business case really strong for that full investment of all the stadiums.
And so when you do this, is this something that the NFL says, you know, we have to fund this as a central organization, or do you have to actually reach out to the teams and say, we want your help with this? How does it organizationally work?
Organizationally, we're made up of the 32 clubs who all have a say in everything we spend and all the revenue. They have a share in the cost of anything as well as a share in the revenue. So yes, we have to sell any idea to all the clubs.
And this is one that they said, yeah, we want to do this.
Right, we tested through with those committees. So we had to first get approval from the competition committee, make sure it, you know, doesn't in any way interfere with competition or ultimately that it keeps a level playing field or enhances the level of competition. And then we go through other committees like the digital media committee, and, you know, there's just a bunch of different committees that'll evaluate the business, you know, proposition around doing something like this, and then ultimately we make, when it's a huge financial commitment, it comes before the general ownership vote, and they vote on whether to proceed. So this past spring, we got approval to continue the testing and work on the business plan side, which is how do you monetize it.
From behind the scenes, how are you getting ready for this?
Yeah, I mean, the cloud is big. I mean, you know, I think we've been talking about the cloud for as long as I've been in IT. We didn't always call it the cloud, but it's been around for a long time. Ultimately, the Internet of Things, everything is transmitting something, and people have this real need to consume it. So how do we process all that data and process it in real time, and in some cases give immediate feedback? And so we're looking at, you know, how we move to the cloud in a really big way to support this explosion of data, and then how we do analytics also in the cloud, and truly move from data sets that we collect to joining it to data sets that are sort of outside our collection for analysis, which is really moving to the next level of big data.
And whose data sets are you thinking about?
There's like all kinds of interesting statistics that are out there that, when you talk about ticket pricing, well, join it to ticket pricing of other sporting events, join it to pricing of, big events, concerts, things like that. So finding, things that are similar and looking for patterns, and, that's what makes this all very exciting.
You've said that the NFL has great statisticians, for instance, but that they don't like new analytics tools. So tell me about a case where you wanted somebody to use a new tool and you had to kind of sell them on it.
We're a performance-driven company, so we analyze our athletes for performance in a very detailed manner. Well, we want to analyze our employees in the same manner. We implemented a performance management system this year. It is the first time that we're tracking electronically our goals. We instituted, a halftime check-in, which is the mid-year review process. All those kinds of things used to be paper done and had a great deal of subjectivity probably to it. And, it was a little uncomfortable because a tool pushed a process change. And that happens a lot in IT. When the process change needs to happen, people believe it needs to happen. You have a steering committee that tells you it needs to happen, but it ultimately doesn't happen until you implement that tool. And so when that happens, sometimes you can get it's not the technology they're frustrated with, it's the process change that got driven, that maybe changed something that had been done many years the same way.
Well, and projects die because the
of
process
that.
change doesn't happen. So how did you manage that?
It's a lot about communication. I think the reason I've been successful so far, and the thing I would encourage all CIOs to do, is to really get good at communicating and building relationships. You don't have to be an expert in every technology to be a CIO, and I'm living testament to that. But you do have to be a business speaking CIO. So you have to learn the business and gain respect of your peers so that they know you have their best interest at heart. And that is just everything from getting a seat at the table, which is CIOs we've been talking about for 20 years, I would guess. But if you really are good at what you do, you don't have to worry about it being invited to the table. If you're not getting invited to the table, sometimes it's organizationally, but most of the time you probably should look in the mirror as to why you're not at the table.
Well, and so give us a tip about how you learn to sort of speak business, if you will. I mean, is this Dale Carnegie? Is this Toastmasters? where do you go?
No, for me it was quite easy because that's how I started in business. I started out in finance. I was a CPA and worked at Disney in finance and planning. I worked in marketing, operations. So I ended up coming into IT from the business world. So I didn't have to learn how to do it. However, I've had a lot of folks work for me over the years that have been, infrastructure or networking or developers who are really, really bright. Some of them I encourage to go back for an MBA, and some of them it's about getting them the right exposure. So for me as a leader, I make sure they're in the right forums so they hear it firsthand. They don't hear it from me. They hear it directly from the CMO if there's a marketing plan. So if you're not getting included in those kind of conversations, you have to really raise your hand. If raising your hand doesn't help, you have to stand on the table. I mean, eventually you have to be, if you want to advance, you have to be in that kind of environment. Lucky for me, the NFL was ready for that when I arrived.
Can you just give us a sense of what the data you have now on a yearly basis that you kind of gather versus when this tracking starts, how much more data is that going to be?
I read somewhere recently that, in the next 10 years it'll be 20-fold. I think we'll be 20-fold in the next 5 years, easily. It's going to, it's a matter of what will we want to collect and analyze, what kind of shelf life it has. Is it the kind of thing that is fan consuming, so after the fan uses it for a certain while on their device, I don't need to keep it forever, versus official record statistics that have to be kept as a matter of record. So again, it gets down to classification of data, security, obviously big concern around all this data and making sure it's properly encrypted if it is being used outside our walls. So all those kinds of things come into play.
You've been working on automating real-time statistics. Does that tie into this, what we're doing on game day?
Yeah,
Talk a
absolutely.
bit about that.
Yeah, so right now, if you go to an NFL game and you were to visit a stats booth, you would see people using, it's called our GSIS system. It's an internally developed statistical gathering system. It was written several years ago, and it requires someone to enter it in, and then we publish it to all the different media outlets as well as our teams and others. So what's changed is now we need to publish to more people more quickly. We have to make sure our connectivity is up, that we don't have interruptions from the connectivity to the stadium. So just the explosion, what data has driven to the back-of-house infrastructure as far as communications infrastructure has been something that I have been surprised about. That, you know, you read a lot about how connected the world is, and that is true. But what underlies all that connection are these, you know, huge pipes between facilities, data centers, and then to the end user, and how the cloud is in the middle of that. So we're having to design some pretty sophisticated communications infrastructures to be able to move all this data as quickly.
So has that been the big kind of challenge?
I'd say that's been the biggest challenge. And this year, and coming in the 2014 season, we changed instant replay. So we will be now doing centralized consulting from New York with the referee on the field. So when he's looking at a play under the hood, he will also be consulting with a centralized location. Well, we didn't have connection between here and every stadium. So in the last 3 months, we've been, you know, fastly building a communications infrastructure between every stadium and 345 Park. And then the redundancy and all that goes with that. That's been, the more people need to consume video or data, the bigger the pipe needs to be, the less congested it needs to be. And frankly, inside an NFL stadium, it's just the opposite. It's the most congested. You know, it's inside concrete, it's filled with people that are primarily made of water, and signals don't travel through concrete and water. So you've got to create this infrastructure that, you know, you can't buy it. It is totally a trial and error type of system. So analytics come into play when we measure network connectivity. So we just entered a deal with Extreme Networks as our official Wi-Fi sponsor, and they are working closely with us to put analytics in every stadium so that we can measure, because it differs. I mean, every unique piece of real estate is different in its infrastructure.
The NFL is, for the first time, going to have Wi-Fi in all the stadiums. Talk about how that idea emerged, and that's not intuitive to me, as why I would use analytics on my fans in the stadium.
Well, we know that they've been telling us for quite some time they wanted to have great connectivity. I mean, we believe there's no better place to experience an NFL game than in an NFL stadium. But the home experience has gotten pretty darn amazing. I mean, with all the multiple screens, with high bandwidth connectivity in your home, you can consume a lot more media than you could if you were sitting in a stadium. So we decided this past year, that the way to do that was we needed to dissect what people were doing in the stadium. What were they trying to do that they were unsuccessfully doing? What was happening in the stadium that was eating up powerful, valuable bandwidth that really they didn't care about? And so at this year's Super Bowl, we put in Extreme's Purview system to measure what our fans were doing, and we learned some amazing things. We learned that when phones automatically connect to Wi-Fi, well, when they connect to Wi-Fi, it automatically starts to download updates on a bunch of apps. Well, that was consuming bandwidth. We wanted to save that bandwidth for people who wanted to post or tweet or take a picture, and so now we've prioritized, you know, app updating to the very lowest point of priority. So that's the kind of stuff you learn. You learn about how to sort of manage your network, but our marketing people are excited about, oh wow, you can tell us how many people are going to Facebook, how many people are tweeting, what kinds of things they're looking at or doing, and then they can go find sponsors for certain segments of the population in their stadium.
And are people at the game, watching the game on their phone?
What we're learning they like to consume are clips, like replays. However, if you have a fantasy league and you have NFL Sunday Ticket, or if you have the Red Zone, you might want to check what's happening in another game while you're in a game. So we do see that. We see people who want to watch other games while they're in a game. And so, you know, during the season, we're working to make sure that, fans can do that.
And do people like shoot a lot of video, I don't know, themselves at the game or something that they then try to upload?
Yeah, that's a good learning was when Wi-Fi networks were first deployed in our stadiums and probably around the world, there was a bigger focus on download speeds because people were downloading stuff. And now we're finding people are more interested in sharing than they are in downloading something. So certainly upload speeds have to be faster than download speeds, for example, so that people can shoot video, share video.
And do the teams want to send you a coupon to buy, a hot dog? Or are you
what? It depends on each. It certainly is permission based, and our focus has really been in providing value add benefits for season ticket holders. So not sort of sending you a coupon, to buy a hot dog, but you know what? We might, if you tell us where you are and tell us where you're sitting, maybe you could win a chance to be on the field before the game, or you could upgrade your seat to a better seat. Certainly fan first. If we think fan first, the monetized value will come.
The Wi-Fi analytics, for instance, I know was a challenge. It took some selling.
Yeah.
Did you get involved in that and sort of trying to convince owners to come on board?
Absolutely. I've probably pitched this idea. Let's see, I'm trying to think how many owners meetings, maybe 6 different owners meetings I presented to the general owners, and then we have these committees. And so that's really the way to get buy-in, is if you get the committee buy-in, and then it's really an owner that's selling the idea to their peers versus someone from the league office. And that works across all of our ideas, not just technology. So I've also spent a lot of time going to clubs and traveling to clubs and just getting to know them. I mean, at the end of the day, it is about building those relationships, and not always had the sort of head of IT had that kind of relationship at the top of the organization. It was typically buried, a little bit lower in the organization. So then when a big price tag came their way, they were all, well, I don't understand. So I think, back to relationships and influencing, that's the way to build your consensus along the way, that when you sort of put it out there, it sails through. I mean, that's the goal.
Thinking ahead 3 years, 5 years, where do you see the NFL going in its use of analytics?
I just think we'll get, more and more fan consuming analytics. I think we'll continue to do what we do to make this game the best game ever played, but our fans will have more access to the content on any device, anytime that they want it, and be able to personalize it to them. I mean, I think, not only the first step in all this is usually, okay, people want your content, and then you realize they want your content, but they want to see it the way they want to see it, and they want to slice and dice it. So we're launching NFL Now this summer, which is a new media platform that's basically you can watch and consume NFL media based on your preferences, based on your platform. And so that's what we're going to see, just more and more of that type of thing.
And do you see this as something that at some point could become a kind of noticeable revenue stream for the NFL?
Next generation stats could have not only monetary value to fan consumption, but broadcasters. I mean, broadcasters, imagine if you could, you didn't have to have a guy sitting to the side that draws those circles around players as they're moving and doing the X's and O's, but it just translates, and then they could move it around on the screen for, so I think between moving these broadcast deals into more and more data you can give them, it just makes the deal even better.
So you've come from previously large utility and entertainment industries. How different is the NFL just from a business perspective, from the way it uses analytics or can use analytics from these businesses? It's
the same challenges and the same opportunities, really. Certainly the back-of-house businesses, we have all the same ERP challenges, just the same kind of, we run a business just like Fortune 500 businesses run. So we have a lot of the challenges and a lot of the same opportunities. However, we haven't always thought of ourselves like that. We've thought of ourselves like a sports team. There's always great focus on the game and front of house, and that's got to be great, and the fan experience has to be awesome. And then behind the scenes, let's sort of, make it the best we can make it. But now bringing some of my learnings from Fortune 500 companies around, no, we really, we could streamline this process. Some of that I've been able to bring just from the fact that typically sports teams or the sports industry hasn't invested in that kind of stuff as much as, say, a Sox, type organization where you're sort of forced by, regulation to do it.
So one last question, Michelle. What kinds of things other businesses can learn from, say, the NFL and the way it's using analytics?
Keep it simple. I mean, I think when you're first starting on an analytics journey, it's very tempting, and I can say this because I went through this at a prior employer, is you can get sold by a giant software company, a big complicated package. And you really do need to get people comfortable with their own data sets and massaging it, even if it's only in Excel to begin with, before you dump some great fancy tool that'll graph it and scatter diagram it. And so a lot of places, like when they start into analytics, they never did it before. So you don't know what to do. So you say, okay, I'm going to go to XYZ vendor and I'm going to buy their whole suite of packages, and then I'm going to pay this consulting firm millions of dollars to build me a data warehouse, and then I'm going to train all my people to be these statisticians. It's really pretty unrealistic. I mean, I think getting people comfortable with putting in good stuff. I mean, it's garbage in, garbage out. Data's got to be good and clean going in. Spending a little bit of time on that and not underestimating the change management impact of transparent analytics. One of the first challenges I ever had was building a dashboard for our CEO when the lines of business didn't want him to have that kind of transparency. The CEO wanted that transparency, but the lines of business weren't all that psyched about it. So those kinds of things, the NFL has managed, because of their size, has been able to grow at a nice pace. And that would be the thing I would say big, large organizations could learn from.
Michelle, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm Michael Fitzgerald for MIT Sloan Management Review. Thank you for being with us. We'll see you again soon.